When you reach perimenopause, I think it's your beautiful warning sign. We don't get to stay the same at this point anymore. It's time to pay attention to what our body is saying, and we can't avoid that piece.
So welcome, Bria. I'm so happy to talk with you about perimenopause. Everybody already knows all the things, but before we jump more into that, I would really like to hear in your own words, like, why this holds special place in your heart. Like, why do you feel like more women need to be prepped for this before they're like in the throes of it?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Leah. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for having me. It's probably for two reasons. One, before I got into perimenopause, I was a fitness and nutrition coach. So like fitness has been a big part of my life since my babies were born. Now they're 15 and 12. And so for about 12 years, that's, how the business I built and how I helped women. And I kind of felt like I'd figured this piece out for myself. I was like, go me, like self high five. I've got my nutrition and fitness sorted. But around the age of 35, for me, I started noticing a shift in a lot of my clients, in how they were feeling, in how they were able to show up for their own health and what was going on. And then around the age of 37, it started happening to me. And it started as honestly, like a restlessness, a restless twitch in my eye. It shifted to like brain fog. It just kind of more fatigue that I was having. And, I wasn't recovering from my fitness the same way. I was really tired. My periods got a bit wonky, which was really, irregular for me. And then I think the final kicker was I stopped sleeping well at night. I started having these night sweats.
Oh.
And for someone who kind of made a living and, I kind of prided myself on my health, it was discouraging. It certainly had me up late in the night Googling things, which we should not do because nothing good comes out of late night Googling, I find, of symptoms. What is this night sweat symptom? And so it had me, head off to my healthcare practitioner, which is always a good sign when things change, right? Always a good thing to do. And she was great. She did blood tests. She asked me all the questions. And in the end, she was kind of like, Bria, you're the picture of health. And I was like, super grateful that I didn't have any of the things that had come up when I was Googling.
Yeah.
But, I walked back to my car and I remember feeling really like disheartened, when you're not feeling well. And at that point I was 37, this is how I'd made my living. And it was a big part of my identity. I'm like, if at 37, I'm the picture of health and I'm doing all these things and this is how I feel, like, I don't know what the next 37 years are going to feel like. Right. So that was a big pivotal point for me to start to understand hormones. And then through my own education and my own certifications and my own journey, really realizing what perimenopause was and what it meant for my body and it really how little we knew as women. And I think that's kind of the second piece of the puzzle of why this is close to my heart is that, women weren't required to be a part of medical research or wellness research until the mid 1990s. So that means that, as you know this, I'm sure you've talked about this already, that means a lot of us have been operating like we're small men. And this is how we're taught, how we're treated in doctors' offices. And so it's really confusing. And not only are things not working or we're not feeling well or we're being misdiagnosed or mistreated, and miseducated, but I think that can create a lot of almost this feeling like something's wrong with me. It's my fault, not just something's wrong with me, but it's my fault because I'm doing the things that's not working. I must not be doing them well enough. And so I think, for me, my passion is like, if I've been in the wellness industry for this many years, working with women, and I didn't know these things, how on earth is a woman whose specialty isn't in the wellness industry ever going to know this stuff if I don't try to make noise about it? So that is really where this came to be for me and why I've become so passionate about sharing the information, changing the lens on it, specifically what it means, what it is, and just getting it out there as best as I can.
Yeah. Something that you said, really, I would like to spend some time on. I think it's really important. And that is that perimenopause is designed to set you free. Can we talk about that? Because I think everyone goes, perimenopause, the devil is coming.
Totally. That's what culture has taught us, right? And I'm sure you explore some of this too, with even just talking about our cycles, like what culture is, impressed upon us to believe. And so for me, I absolutely believe that perimenopause happens for us and not to us. So it's our opportunity. And that's really that lens flip that I want to change for women. And I guess the way I like to kind of talk about it is that, a lot is going on in a woman's body when it starts to happen. Perimenopause is not a diagnosable condition. It's a transition. It's like puberty in reverse. And so it's long, it's a little different for everybody what the symptoms come out. But there's really, three major things I think happening in the body that can be helpful for us to understand why it's happening for us. One, that the role of our main sex hormones are being passed from our ovaries to our adrenals, which stress managers for us. And so the state of those at the time of this transition can really determine how our symptoms are, how this transition goes for us. So in that sense, it's a real highlighter of like, hey, something else is not right. And these symptoms are really just like, let's pay attention and let's figure out what the root issue is. The amount of our hormones obviously starts to go down, right? In puberty, they go up enough for us to be able to reproduce. In perimenopause, they start to decrease and, culminating in menopause where we're no longer reproductively capable, but they can stay balanced if we are, again, paying attention to what else is not serving us in our life. So it's another one of those areas where it's like, youth is forgiving and our body maybe and our hormones have maybe allowed us to make choices, make decisions, have habits that aren't serving us. But it's like, well, we'll just bob and weave like a brand new engine. But now it's like, okay, I've headed up to here. It's time to do it my way. We've done it your way. So we need to pay attention to that piece. And then the last piece that I think doesn't get enough airtime is really what's happening in our brain. And the science is really that, our hippocampus and our amygdala, which are our memory encoders and retrievers of the brain, are really sensitive to this shift, to the ups and downs of the hormones and the balance of them. And what happens in perimenopause is often that we start to become more aware of things that are bothering us and, past traumas that maybe we haven't dealt with, and this is where I think a lot of people get what they call meno rage, or they're just more irritated all the time, or a lot of the times there's a lot of concern around libido and it's not actually lubrication. It's more just interest and energy. And I think that has more to do with what's going on in our brain. And so that's the science, but the philosophy, and I think this one gets me so excited about what's happening for us, is that from puberty until now, perimenopause, when you start to make that shift in menopause, we've been somewhat hormonally hijacked, I like to call it. And maybe that's a negative term, but every month we have these beautiful hormones that kind of come in and they're really designed to make us reproduce and keep the world going, like amenable to even having sex, interested in having it, and then also prioritize like the livelihoods of these children and these babies that we create. And now that is no longer needed and it's going away. So in essence, we're getting so much more mental bandwidth to pay attention to what really has been bugging us all along. It's like kind of like how men get to live, it's like now we're fully aware. And that's hard, I think, for women, because we're like, why am I so irritated? It's like, well, you've probably always been irritated, but every month estrogen comes along and like puts on these rose-colored glasses, as you know. And so you're like, oh, not a big deal, not a big deal. But really, it's a big deal. So
yes.
Yeah.
It's so important.
In essence, yeah. I think it's like, in essence, I feel like it's happening for us because it's like, hey, you've got 30, 40, 50 years left. Let's make these the best years you've got. But now you have to pay attention. You've got to do the work. Now's the time.
Yeah.
So that's really where that comes from.
I think that's so important. Especially like you talk about estrogen being rose-colored glasses. Like, my Lanta, does estrogen get like the bad rap? People are like, I have estrogen dominance. I have all these issues. And I'm like, same thing. I saw this the other day circulating on TikTok where it was like, let's talk about why cortisol sucks. And I was like, actually, cortisol gets you up in the morning. Cortisol doesn't suck. And neither does estrogen, but like all within good levels.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point. Like cortisol is often why we drink alcohol, why we eat sugar. Like we like that little burst that comes from it spiking in our body, and or why we have hustle addictions. Like it's not just dopamine, it's cortisol.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. It is important in many ways, and we quite like it in
Yeah.
many ways.
It's just that we
Too much.
don't really know how to not have it go like outside of its reign. So something I think then we should talk about is like, how do you prepare for like a
Mm,
smooth transition? You know, you said, you know, you were the picture of health, you were doing all the things. And then, so what do you wish you would have started doing like before 35? I guess I'm going to give it a number,
yeah.
35.
No, that's great. I think a big thing for me, I wish I'd understood, especially being someone who like loved fitness and really like used fitness, probably in ways, probably overused fitness at times. But I think recognizing the cyclical nature of women and, considering how to work out and rest in line with that rhythm, which I know you talk about. So I think that this, if I had known that even in my 20s and like early 30s, that would have been massive. Part of my issue, was too much cortisol, and that was throwing off my hormone imbalance, causing a greater workload during an already time in perimenopause when your body's going through so much. And so I needed to learn how to do the opposite of what I was doing, which is be a bit more still, be a little bit more calm. And I didn't recognize, I mean, I'd always did the same type of 6 intense workouts week after week with my one rest day, rain or shine. And I prided myself on that. I didn't realize the damage that this good thing was doing for me. But also even recognizing, proper stress management and your relationship with stress management, and the need for joy and pleasure in that part of your life to bring down cortisol levels, to find myself a little bit inside of the busy life of being a mom and a wife and all of these things. I don't think I recognized how valuable sleep and the amount of sleep was. I always liked sleep, but probably again during different times of our cycle, I could have used more sleep. During different times in my life, and it's not always that easy, as especially when you have littles. But understanding it, I think information is that power. And probably the last piece, of course, is around nutrition. There's a lot of hidden stressors in our nutrition and our environment that we don't recognize. And just because you're getting results by eating a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that's the right thing to support your hormones nutritionally or your unique body. So diving further into those health pillars to begin with, I would say was a big piece for me, that stillness, that coming back, and learning how to be comfortable in stillness and not just trying to hustle my way through life.
Oh, you have so many gold nuggets there. Especially like the stillness and the hustle. I won't spend too much time there because we have an episode coming out specifically on that. But like, I just want to take a moment of it because it's like, how often do moms think they're bad moms because they literally can't just like sit and watch their kids play trucks or them play trucks or tea parties. If you have girls, I have boys, so I always think trucks.
Yeah.
Trucks
Yeah,
and dirt.
cars and
Um
trains.
yeah, and it's like I hear all the time from these moms, I'm touched out, I'm too wired. I just can't even, I have so many things to do. I can't imagine just sitting and doing like playing trucks. It's such a waste of my time, but at the same time, I feel like a bad mom. But it's like we literally do not have the tools, but then also like how to slow down, how to just be. It's a learned I don't even want to call it a skill. It's not really a learned skill. It's like just a learned way of being.
Absolutely. And I think hustle addiction is real, right? We get, we tie that like accomplishment to our worth every day. So we think if I don't accomplish all this and I'm not constantly moving, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I think a lot of those things come up. And that was a big piece for me, was like I had to take about 4 months and just learn how to do yoga. And it was really challenging. And I had a lot of, type A, fitness loving clients, and I still do. And they're like, but I don't like yoga. And I'm like, well, why? And it's like, because it doesn't feel like it's accomplishing anything. And I think often I think there's two pieces. One, obviously the body needs rest, but two, what comes up in the stillness in your mind is typically something we need to be dealing with and not avoiding. And that was a big piece for me too. It's like, what is the truth of what's coming up, what I'm really feeling? And let's address those things, because sometimes it doesn't matter much you sleep, how much you move, how well you eat. If you are not dealing with the bigger pieces of your life that maybe you're not happy with, then yeah, you can eat a perfect diet, quote unquote, whatever that might be, and you're still going to feel crummy because we have these other stress faucets in life that trump them.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like, and I'm so thankful that I learned about cycle syncing before I reached that
Mm,
stage, because it has given me permission to give myself so much more grace. Like right now, for example, I'm in my luteal phase and I'm in my late luteal phase. So I'm like, only have like 4 or 5 more days before my period. And I was doing my workout this morning, and I always cycle my workouts with the phases of my cycle. And I was still like had a set plan though of what I was going to do. And I like went to do a shoulder press and I was like, yeah, there's no way 12 reps are coming out of me. I was like, we're doing 8. And it was before I've been like, what's wrong with me? Like, I did this 2 weeks ago. I am so weak. Like, push through. How do you want to build muscle? And I was just like, this is the phase of your cycle and we're going to back it off. And I know that follicular phase is going to come back around and I will be stronger. Like, it does not bother me. But before it would.
I love that, and I'm so excited to talk more about that with you at a later time. But I think that is, if I had only known that, again, I think that grace we give ourselves and almost that like humor about it. You're like, oh, luteal phase, like, oh, here we go, and you're like, oh, I guess I need to eat a little more, and you just chill out a little bit about it. And I think that grace, that compassion is so important. And I have many clients, because I'm 42 and a lot of my clients are in those perimenopause years. When we get into the cycle syncing, I think a lot of us are really almost angry that we didn't know about it. I'm grateful I'm learning about it, but I'm so frustrated that I didn't get to know that before to prevent some of this at this time.
So I have a question for you. Sometimes I get women like that will be, when we talk about cycle syncing, we talk about all of that. They'll be like, don't you think it's ridiculous that as a woman, I have to do these things just to feel good? And I would love your take on that.
I think that's a real perspective thing. And I think unfortunately, or for whatever it is, we've been, again, told, talked, cultured into thinking we're small men. So I think that's just kind of, and try to say it kindly, like it's just conditioned thinking to think that like, look what the female body does. Like it is completely different than a male body and works on that. So for me, I think about it. If we were told at 12, 13, 14, how the beauty in our bodies and the opportunity in our bodies, then I don't think we would have that mindset a little bit later on. And we can't I was doing some research recently and on like the neuroscience. It wasn't that long ago that, they measured they measured and weighed women's brains and men's brains. And because women's brains were smaller and weighed less, that they said, well, women are just not as smart, but we're just smaller beings, so it's like, it's just it's an evolution of our thinking, I think, to get there. And I understand. I think it's that same thinking where we're like, oh, I hate having my period. I talk to a lot of women who are like, I can't wait to not have my period. It's such a pain. And I just think that's the lens we've been given from culture. And we can change that, and we should change that.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I think it's that flip thing of not why do I have to do this, but like how cool that our bodies like have all these phases and you have all of these different superpowers that you can tap into. And because of all of that, like we're able to grow babies. And because of all that, like, I mean, speaking of studies on the brain, I think pregnancy, what it changes to like your brain is so cool. Like, and women's bodies get to do that because of our hormones, not in spite of our hormones. Like, And yeah, we just need to change the whole messaging, like if we would stop being like, my periods suck, and inundating like teenagers with this, that would make such a difference.
Well, yeah, and the whole world's been created around the male hormone rhythm, and doesn't even consider the fact that, I mean, ultimately we can accomplish like 150% of what a man can half the month, and the other half maybe only 75, but we just need to honor that piece so that we can crush out the 150. And
Exactly.
yeah, it really is that perspective though. It's like you think about a rainy day, and for some people it's like, oh, it's raining outside. But for other people, it's like, let's go dance in the rain. Let's kiss in the rain. Like, look at the smell of the rain on the warm pavement. Like,
Mhm.
it really just comes down to how you've been taught to think about something.
Oh, yeah.
And there's so many gifts to our cycle. And I think women are magic. So
Hmm.
and we are, come on, look what happens. Look
Yeah.
what we do.
It's so true. It's so true. And we've just, like you said, we've been conditioned, and we've also been conditioned to continually view ourselves from that like less than, like, oh, I can't do that because I'm on my period, or like even like when you're young, like especially if you're not taught a lot about period education, like for example, let's say you get your period and everybody's going swimming, and let's say nobody gave you the correct tools, and you're like, oh, can't take a pad into the swimming pool or whatever, And so I think it starts with everything, like how we're viewing it, how we're talking about it. And I feel like we're getting off track. So I need to come back to perimenopause, because I could talk
No,
about this for a while.
but it's an important piece. You asked me, what should you do for women who are, listening, that are before perimenopause? What can they do to prevent it, or even in the early stages? And I think cycle syncing is really one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle. And just listening to the whispers of your body, recognizing that there's messages there. And instead of being like, oh, I'm tired, let's caffeinate up. It's like, oh, I'm tired. How can I get a bit more sleep? How can I lean on my partner? How can I learn to ask for help better? How can I honor my cycle?
Oh, yes. Ask for help. Like, so important. It's like, as soon as we're tired or we're more hungry, it's like, oh, something's wrong with me. I like don't have enough willpower. That's why I'm hungry. Oh, I'm tired because like I'm lesser than and I need more sleep and I shouldn't have to do that. It's just, yeah, a lot of it's stories.
It's what culture, and I think culture has done that to us. So these conversations are so important, because I think it allows us to normalize it a little bit more and be like, yeah, it is hard to ask for help. It shouldn't be, and we can practice it. We can work on it.
100%. So now, if we were going to break it down to 3 steps, because we like numbers, what are 3 steps to guarantee you're going to have a much smoother transition? Literally, transition. I'll just call it that.
I love this. This is great. Well, I would say, okay, the first step is recognizing that every body, in this transition. So let's try to go like we're starting the transition, because probably the steps for transition is a little different than before, but every body really needs some recognition of what actually is happening. So when you're having symptoms, we do want to think about that as time to pay attention to something going on. And it likely means we need what I like to call a healing period. So step 1 is to always make sure you're taking a healing phase. Now, if you aren't having symptoms, that healing phase is probably going to be like end of luteal, like beginning of menstrual, or your menstrual week every month. Like every month we're really nourishing and we're taking that time. If you're in perimenopause or you're not, and you're having a lot of symptoms, then we know there's typically an imbalance. And kind of like hormones we can't see. It's almost like a mental health thing, right? So I like to make it tangible. It's almost like if you broke your foot, you're not going to walk around without a cast on and bash it around things. It's going to hurt. It's going to get worse. The inflammation is going to get worse. So we always want this step 1 is that real healing phase. And if you're in a hormone imbalance, that phase is going to be a bit longer, right? 4 weeks, maybe even 6 weeks. And so we need to cast up that phase and really rest and nourish for that piece. So step 1 is either the maintenance is doing that every single month, or in a healing period or in a need for healing, we're really taking that time. And that looks like sleeping more, taking a step back from intense workouts and really just focusing on functional movement that the body needs. really good quality nourishment in our nutrition and stress management. After that phase, step 2 is what I like to call like healing and repair. When this cast comes off the foot, we really quickly want to start our training up again. Everyone's like, oh, let me get back to my 5K, my 10K. But what we should be doing is going to the physiotherapist and making sure we have full range of motion. So kind of slowing that down. So in your hormones, that looks like once we've kind of moved through the healing, we're feeling a little bit better before you start diving back into all of your hustle things and productivity. Let's make sure we're taking a look and we're really getting the optimal nourishment in our nutrition. We're really getting the quality sleep that we need. We're looking at those other areas of our life to make sure now that we have the bandwidth, we're dealing with those before we dive into step 3, which is when I think we get to kind of advance and accomplish goals again, right? Like, let's make sure we're honoring the cycle and also the healing cycle of our body, no matter what stage of your hormones you are in.
Mm-hmm. I do think that the part you said where you have to slow down is so hard, especially for like the type A, or especially when symptoms are like weight gain. I hear a lot of times like weight gain around your midsection. And it's like, I work out so much and I just can't lose that weight, even though like my face will thin out or whatever, the situation is. And I like your example because my husband's actually a physical therapist. And some of the exercises I sometimes have to do, like when I started running, I had knee pain, like very on the side of my knee. And I had to stop running. And he was making me do this exercise. And I was like, this is so boring. I'm like sitting there doing these like side step ups. I was like, this isn't even hard. I can do this and read a book. Like, how is this helping me? And he's like, just do it. He's like, you have to do 3 sets every day. And I'm like, whining over here. Like, I can't believe I have to do this. This is so boring. But guess what? I don't have any more knee pain. So it works, even though sometimes you're like, this is boring.
It's always the small, seemingly insignificant things that are going to make the difference between you sliding back into, imbalance, or holding on, for the women who are really, frustrated with the stuck weight, which was a symptom of a bigger issue, and peak performance, right? Like, that's the difference that's what pro athletes and Olympians are doing out there. So if you want to be a peak performer, and I feel like most women these days are asking Olympic levels of output of their body, but not treating themselves like Olympians. And
Ooh,
so that's
so
a big
good.
piece. So if you want to have the kind of output that you're in, the peak performance that I think you're pushing for, you got to treat yourself like an Olympian or like a peak performer. And that requires the slowing down of physiotherapy. Every athlete knows that.
Oh, okay. You need to quote that. Then you can trademark that, sell that on merch or something. But I mean, if you think about it, like, let's just say from a mom's perspective, because I am a mom, so I feel like, I can bring it full circle here. You are, making all your kids food. Maybe you're taking your kids to school. Maybe you're taking your kids to extracurriculars. You are, cleaning the house, planning the meals, trying to take care of, any other extra things that you do. Try and be a good friend, try and be a good wife, all of these things. But you only eat your kids' leftovers instead of sitting down and eating a meal. And you're like, I can do this on 5 hours of sleep. I can't have more sleep. I don't have time for more sleep. Just drink more coffee. And then we wonder, like, why we feel this way.
We do these things for our kids, but we wouldn't want our kids to do these things for themselves. So it's a very interesting conundrum, because we all know at the end of the day, they do what we do, not what we say. So if you want your children, I think, to be happy and healthy, you're going to have to learn how to do that for yourself. And it's not putting yourself last, ever.
Mm-hmm. So much is caught, like more than taught. Like, I mean, they pick up on so many things. Even like my little boys right now, they'll say something and I'm like, I must say that a lot, because I don't know where else you would have learned that.
Yeah, especially at your kids' age. Yeah. You're like, oh, it's like a little mirror. Oh, lovely.
Sometimes not always so great, but
no.
But it's good to know. And so what about the women that are like maybe they're go, go, go. They don't have any energy, but they don't have any time. So what do you say to them when you're like, you actually need to slow down? Like the mental stumbling blocks. Like what's your 2 cents to them?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's where I really dive into, reminding us that healing takes time. And if you're suffering, right? So it's usually some type of suffering from symptoms that cause people to seek out help, your help, my help, help from a doctor or whatever, or makes them look outside to like something's wrong, I need to fix. So if we're suffering, then we recognize that something's not right. And again, our youth is forgiving, but healing takes time. So you have to give time for that ankle to heal if you want to even get to the small, full range of motion to get back to the marathon running. And you might get to that marathon and realize like, ooh, that's not what I love anymore. But you cannot avoid, and I think you hear this in cycle thinking as well, like Mother Nature never rushes, but everything gets done. Like when you slow down and you heal, you'll actually have more energy, more focus, more productivity to accomplish what you want. And at the end of the day, we all know like cortisol is a finite source. Like if you do burn through it, it will go, and that's much more dangerous. So we do have to deal with it at some point in time. And when you reach perimenopause, I think it's your beautiful warning sign. But if you don't start to change, we don't get to stay the same at this point anymore. It will start to sink. And that's when things get harder and harder. So it's time to pay attention to what our body is saying, and we can't avoid that piece. And so I think that's really where I go, is just the reminder of how important healing needs to happen. And we recognize that, right, in so many tangible ways. If you went to your doctor and you were diagnosed with something very specific and they were like, you need to go to chemo, then you would do that and you would take your healing time, maybe, right? Some people would. And so but for us, we don't always honor that in ourselves, especially with an intangible thing like hormones that women have been taught to ignore.
And for some of them, you feel like I can keep pushing through, like I can, until your symptoms stack up so much that you're debilitated in whatever form. And it's like, let's listen to them before, we get to that point where we're debilitated. Because how much longer does it take to heal when, your mountain of symptoms is literally a mountain versus like, some red flags?
Absolutely. I think that's the thing. And so, when I run into it a lot with my clients it's like, this, what could be a 12-week window to feel amazing and release weight if that's what you're wanting to do, or start to build muscle again, or just have the energy to do the things you want to do, becomes a 6-month window, because our bodies are not vending machines. We don't get to just put something in and get something back. We do need to, like, what we're experiencing in our body today has a lot to do with what we've done over the last 5 years. And I think that's an important piece. So for the women listening who are 30, what you're doing, you're building your 40-year-old body right now. And for those in your 40s, you're building your 50-year-old body right now. And I think when we start to think that way, it makes it a little bit easier to slow down and make the decisions that I think are easier to make when you get older and you're forced to.
Yeah, I get that so much. So where can the women find more about you and all the things? Can you tell us all the stuff?
Thank you. Yeah. So I host a podcast as well called the Period Whisperer Podcast. So it's all about listening to the whispers of your body in perimenopause and beyond. So you can find that anywhere, or hit me up on Instagram. I always love hearing from people at Bria_period_whisperer. And there's, I have all the freebies and the things there, but just come connect, see if it resonates, and say hi.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Leah.